Welcome to Inside Style. I'm your host, George Worrell. Thank you for tuning in to today's show. This show today is our special edition of Men and Women in Recovery, Living Life on Life's Terms. I have the pleasure of welcoming to Inside Style Tara Handron. Tara is a good friend of mine, and she's the VP Marketing and Development at Unity Healthcare, a nonprofit organization that provides comprehensive health and human services to underserved communities in Washington, D.C. With over 11 years of leadership experience in addiction treatment and recovery sector, she brings a wealth of knowledge and skills in fundraising, communication, external partnerships, board management, and community engagement. She's also the founder of What's a Girl to Do production. Tara also combines her passion for theater, social impact to create and perform works that raise awareness and hope about substance use, disorder recovery, and mental health. Her one-woman critically praised play, Drunk with Hope, has been featured in various venues, festivals across the country. I present to you again, Tara Handron. Welcome to Inside Style.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I didn't know all of that. I love getting bios, you know?
It's always funny listening to your own bio.
I know,
I'm like, who is that?
I thought I was the only one that says that when I listen to those kinds of things. It's like, oh, was that me? Because it wasn't, as we'll get into, that wasn't always me. Tell us, what brought you to D.C.?
Georgetown.
Okay.
Georgetown brought me to D.C. I had been living in Chicago at the time. This was back in 2006. Mm-hmm. I was an actor, working various kinds of office day jobs, and realized I really want something a bit more robust for my future. Mm-hmm. So acting was wonderful, but it, you know, as most actors know, your hours are often not filled with acting.
Yeah.
They're filled with a lot of other things. And so I decided I should probably get my master's, kind of pull all my different skills and experiences together. And I mean, it's really kind of divine. I thought, well, what about DC? Well, if I'm going to go to DC, what about Georgetown? And like, oh, look, they have a program. Well, I'll apply. Just kind of went from there.
Okay. Now, was that, you know, we have something in common, and that we are both recovering from alcohol.
Yeah.
And so let's roll back just a little bit.
Yeah.
When did you think that you needed help? Because I don't know, it was very late for me.
Yeah. And for me, I was 26, which is pretty young. You know, I mean, now I see young people getting sober much younger than that, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. I knew from pretty early on that, like, my drinking was not great, right? Mm-hmm. I was blacking out a lot. I also, though, it didn't worry me enough to think, oh, I need to do something about this, because it brought me so much relief.
Okay.
Like, I heard someone say this yesterday. It's like my shoulders would just go down like 3 inches as soon as I took that drink. Mm-hmm. But I would say, like, it really started to hit me that I needed to stop when I was living in New York City. I'm from the New York area. Mm-hmm. I went to college in New York City, was living on the Upper East Side, and was trying to control my drinking and wasn't doing a very good job and was extremely uncomfortable. And then moved to Chicago, which something we talk about in recovery is these geographic cures, right? Yeah. I figured if I moved, you know, New York was the problem, I'll move to Chicago. And that started another couple years of like not drinking, trying to not drink, then binging. And then in May of 2000, like, too many things were happening and the boyfriend had it. And so I got freaked out and I said, okay, fine, I'll go to a recovery meeting.
Okay. And were you able to kind of sustain that? Or?
I was. So what's interesting is that so because it was a really long time ago, you know, my resource at the time was the Yellow Pages, mm-hmm. and I learned about recovery meetings through like movies and books, and I just thought I have no idea what to do, but maybe this would be helpful. And so I went the very first night I moved to Chicago in 1998, September. And I remember thinking, like, this is really nice. Everyone's really nice, but like, I don't need this. Like, this isn't for me. Mm-hmm. And so it really wasn't until May when things got really, really, really bad that of 2000 that I was like, okay. And
What was really bad you considered? What
sure.
was-
So when I drank, I did not know what was going to happen. So what was interesting is that as it got closer to that time where I stopped for good, I wasn't someone who was drinking every day. I wasn't drinking in the morning because the whole problem was that like when I took even a sip, I didn't know what was going to happen. Maybe it was going to be one drink, but it probably was not going to be. And I had cheated on my boyfriend. I lied about it. My family was constantly worried about me, and they were all back on the East Coast and just didn't really know what to do. And because there weren't some of those sort of stereotypical hallmarks of alcoholism, I think my family didn't think, well, we should probably send her to treatment or something. You know, it was more like, let's find another therapist, and therapy is fantastic. I mean, love it, love it, love it, and it's key.
But that's also a little she.
You know,
Not in a bad way, but I'm just saying, like, we hear the stories. Like,
you're
that's
absolutely right. And I'm someone who, I realize I grew up with some privilege. You know, my father is a psychologist, and so certainly from an early age, if there was a problem, like, boom, here's a referral from dad. But just, it was, and so all these things were kind of piling on top of me. I could barely keep my job. I had just gotten a job as a receptionist, which I could barely handle that. Literally. I mean, people would call and I could barely remember like who they wanted to be transferred to. And like, and people gave me a lot of grace. I mean, I look back and I think about the different day jobs I had. And so at that time, I was desperate enough, and really the loss of the significant other, or the like seeming like I was going to lose him. He was someone I'd known since grammar school. Like one of the nicest people on the planet. And I thought, oh my gosh, if this person can't even look me in the eye, is throwing my stuff out of his apartment, doesn't want to speak to me, like, I really have to do something.
Yes, things are bad.
Yeah.
So before we move on to like kind of the solution and the helps, in your writings, were you able to figure out what it is? Because I know for me, in my writings, and they talk about steps and stuff like that. But in my writings, I was able to find out, or at least identify, that other people were not the problem. It was me. And, it took me, what we say, out of the blame game. So I was able to say what it was that I didn't like about myself, of why I would, on top of enjoying drinking, I'd love to sit back and cross my, just look cute and,
fancy.
And everybody's having, but
it's all cute
there was
and fancy till you get sick on yourself and all sorts of things.
But when you're drinking, I was drinking in the morning. I couldn't hold a job, and all day, and whatever was available. And I too came from, that privileged family, and they just couldn't understand it. And that also, but in my writings, I figured out what it was that I didn't like, that alcohol numbed. Do you see what I mean?
I do see. Yeah.
So were you able to do that? Like,
yes. I mean, and I think that's essential for maintaining recovery, right? Like, if I don't see what the causes and conditions are, and become willing to address them. We used to say back in Chicago, where I got sober, the same person will drink again, right? So if I didn't change, if I didn't see what needed to be changed, I would have been in trouble. And I did. And frankly, it was terrifying. I remember looking at these pages and being like, oh my gosh, I am selfish. I can be a real jerk, and I just, but in my mind, I was trying because I was so convinced. I grew up in late 70s, early 80s, where it was like, it was Annie, it was big colors, it was like, be pretty and smile and like just look good and sound good and you will be fine. And like the fact was, I wasn't fine, and I was acting out in ways, and the drinking would just kind of cover it up, right? Like I could take a couple drinks and suddenly like, boom, I could show up. I mean, I felt that way when I was 15 years old, which again, to me, for what alcohol did for me at such an early age is such a huge indication of the fact that I chemically am not someone who can handle alcohol. I simply can't. It's all over my family. You know, my dad has now been sober for 12 years.
Nice.
You know, I mean, it's so there's no. When I first realized, like, wow, this really is my issue, I was both relieved and terrified. But ultimately, what a gift to know, like, this is my. It's like an illness, right? Like, it is an illness. There's no confusion. I have it. Here's my treatment for it.
Yeah. What was your first job clean?
So my first job, so it really was technically that, so the first day job was that working at that ad agency. So it was an ad agency in Chicago. I was answering phones. My friend, who was also an actor, helped me get it. And people were so nice to me. And I'm not kidding. Like, I actually ended up making amends later to my boss because I would be on a headset all day. I was either talking to my boyfriend or my mom, like literally all day. Okay. And people could come in and they couldn't really notice. It was so bad. But I held it together, you know, and just barely, but I held it together. And then I did a show, my first sober show. I had about 4 months of sobriety. And what's so interesting is that, and this was the first play I ever did. Like, I never went on stage drunk, but like hungover, stuff like that, didn't know my lines. And like, I was prepared. I worked really hard. I was acting alongside one of my dearest friends. And so the progress was like the performance itself. Like, we got great reviews. My friend and I actually both specifically got, you know, good reviews. But the way I treated people backstage, I was obnoxious. I just was always like dancing around. I thought it was so funny. And and then the director would try to direct me and I would get really defensive.
And this is at the beginning of recovery?
This is the early recovery.
Okay, yeah.
You know?
And it takes time.
Like, it takes time.
It takes
I was
time.
so raw, you know. I just was this raw nerve out in the world trying to function. And so I ended up making amends to the director and two of the actors, the two leads, because I was not a great person to work with.
But I think it's all a journey. And I think
it is.
Once we, you know, I think the big thing, I just celebrated 29 years.
Yes. It's amazing.
Yeah, August 17th.
Amazing.
And you celebrated 24 on May 9th.
Yes, your birthday.
But yeah, but fear was the big thing for me. I remember my first job was at Legal Seafoods. And I knew that I didn't want to wear a uniform. So I had two choices, a waiter, because I was living in a sober house and I had to pay my rent. And I wanted money to get my hair cut. That was a big thing for me. And so she says, I was like, I thought to myself, well, it's a uniform and I'm going to have to serve alcohol. And I don't want to have to serve alcohol right now.
Yeah. And
she says, well, we have a host position. I'm like, okay. I can wear my own clothes. But then I'm like, I don't have any clothes. So I went to this place in Southeast with this place, they told me he gave away clothes. And because I had been around fashion and stuff like that, I was able to pick out really good things. And I remember the woman, Karen Lawrence, who hired me, I confided in her that I was newly recovered and she opened the door, and I remember she allowed me, and you can tell your story about this too. I was blessed enough to encounter people, to see something, a talent in me that I probably either didn't know I had or I had dreamt about it and didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
So that's what one day at a time, and all of those did some 20, you know.
I love that.
Yeah. So you're feeling, so after your job, and so when did you start, you know, going back to school and, you know, getting the accolades and... So
I started doing more shows that really aligned with who I was, you know. It was so wonderful to start making choices based on, do I actually want this part versus I just need to be on stage. And I would say, like, one of the things, so I had a mentor, like, on my who has now helped me over the years. This boss I had, Miriam, who when I switched from that day job to another one because the agency closed, and she she saw my potential. She saw my potential to like, she made it so like I was able to get good business experience working with her, but had all the flexibility I needed to perform. And then in terms of the performing, I studied at Second City. I was in their conservatory and I studied with these amazing people. And Tim O'Malley, who had been on the main stage, he was one of my teachers. He created this one-man show and it was amazing. And I went to see it and I didn't know him yet. And I was blown away. I sent him an email. I was like, look, if you ever need an understudy, because there's one woman in it, because there's like sort of a little ensemble that would come in and out. So I said, I would do it in a heartbeat. And sure enough, 4 months later, he calls me and he's like, look, I need an understudy. Will you do it? And I was like, oh my gosh, absolutely. And he entrusted me with this beautiful show, you know, that he had created about his own life going into like Second City, almost making it to Saturday Night Live, crashing and burning, and like coming out the other side. So I'd say like, you know, that was one of the things there. It's like, I just stood back and I was like, oh, people believe in me, you know, people believe in me. And then when I applied to Georgetown and I went to my boss and I went to one of my, you know, sort of secondary bosses at this legal search firm and asked for a recommendation, they were like, absolutely. In fact, why don't we help you get a day job at our DC location while you're in school? You know, it's like recovery taught me how to show up, suit up, show up. I am so not perfect, still not. But if I can keep consistently displaying that willingness to show up and use the gifts I've been given, people are like, let me help. And it's taught me to do the same thing for others, you know, which is so cool.
And it really is life on life's terms.
Yes.
And just the going through all the things that pursuing your dreams. Because I remember going to meetings and I thought, if I have to sit here and listen to this, I don't know if I can do it every day. And then a guy came in and he said, hey, I just came from the Mike Tyson fight and I flew first class and I stayed in an amazing hotel. And I thought, that was my aha moment. I'm like, so you can have a great, fabulous life not drinking.
Yeah.
That caught my attention.
Yes.
You know, so there, for people who are listening and, you know, it doesn't have to be alcohol, it can be anything. The fear, and then why am I here? Why am I doing this?
Right.
You know, there had to be something aside from listening to everybody's stories about why I'm here. And it was just, for me, that chance to live, that it opened a door for me to, one, start my own business, two, to plan these amazing events and then start in fashion and have these wonderful clients. And then the dream that I thought about as a little boy of the actor, but not the actor in your perspective, the actor of talking and communicating with people.
Yeah.
And it's what we're doing now is fulfilling the dream.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad you brought that up because I think people see, and I try to do this with my play, Drunk with Hope. Sometimes people think of recovery and think of these rooms as places where it's all gloom and doom and it's only speaking about things that are in the past or that are dark. And the fact is we do talk about the darkness. Got to talk about the darkness. But for me, I also have to laugh. I have to laugh. And that, like, dark humor has become like my thing. Like, I love it. I love in my play, like, talking about something really kind of horrific and people find themselves laughing. And then they're like, wait a second, I'm laughing. And there's this confusion and it's beautiful. And like you, in the rooms, that's where I figured out, oh, I could run marathons. I could go to grad school. I could write a play. I could star in my own play. Like, these are things.
Write a book.
Right, exactly.
And travel across country.
Exactly.
You know,
all the
anything.
stuff you do.
There's so many things. And when you talk about inspirations, like that made me think of my friend Amy, who, when I got sober in Chicago, she had posted something about a show that she was doing at the Goodman Theater, which is like one of the very best theaters, like not just in Chicago, but in the country. And I was like, wait a second. I'm like, this gal's doing a show at the Goodman. I was like, okay, my life is not over. And it's been cool because she's done tons of amazing stuff. And I just keep watching her and I'm like, maybe someday, you know?
Well, you know, Cal Burnett says that. Like, she would see her friends and stuff. She's like, I'm next.
Yeah.
I'm next.
Yeah.
I'm next, and you create your thing. So tell us more about the play. When is it? You know, how?
So I started when I was at Georgetown. My thesis was about women in recovery, specifically women getting sober through 12-step recovery, which, as you and I know, all these different sort of anonymous programs that are out there. There's a lot of them now for different ailments. And so this particular one was research around Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was, talking to all these women, interviewing all these different women, because I really felt like, wouldn't it be great to just provide like a whole set of like almost snapshots of different experiences, different women, different ages, different colors, different religions, and be able to say like, look, here's what this illness can look like. It's not only men, or only older men, or only older white men, or only people who are poor. It's like, it's the gamut. And so I presented it as part of my thesis when I was at Georgetown. I worked with Caron Zacharias, who's an incredible playwright who's actually based here, and Derek Goldman, who's the head of the drama department at Georgetown, and just like amazing. And presented it for part of my thesis, and enough friends said to me, if you did this again, I'd bring my friends. And so my director, Laura Brienza, who is an undergrad at Georgetown at the time, who's now a writer and director, we got together, we raised the money, and we produced it over at H Street Playhouse, over, on H Street corridor. And got a bunch of reviews, like got kind of built up a kind of a base of information about it. And from there, submitted to festivals, shared it with other mentors who were like, yes, keep doing it. And actually it was Norm Holly, who's with Second City, had said like, this is great, festivals, go get reviewed, go get experience. So like Capitol Fringe Festival in DC, Chicago Fringe, Hollywood Fringe. I'm done it in a bunch of other places. I've done it in jails in Richmond.
Oh, that's good. No,
Yeah,
you're taking it around.
and getting it to people, and it was amazing. I'm in this jail, and like there's just folks all around me, and they're laughing, and I'm like, oh my god. And we're simpatico. You know what I mean? We're obviously living in very different circumstances, but they get me, I get them.
Yeah.
And
Because many times, I know for me, we were in jail in our minds.
yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes still, I have to remind myself, we used to call it the committee. My mind will tell me things are worse than what they are.
They're so
or
mean.
that nobody like really wants to see my play, or nobody wants to hear my podcast, or, and I have to combat it. I cannot wait for Tara to tell me that everything is okay. I have to train myself.
Yeah.
So in finishing up in
Yeah.
what we're talking about, and we could talk about this forever.
Well, and I was going to say, I'm doing the play in Nebraska, so
Oh,
everyone
good.
hears this, and you're in Lincoln, Nebraska in
Yeah.
September. So I need to post about it. But anyway, so we got for the recovery community up there, I've been invited.
But
so.
I also think it's not so much for the recovering community, people who know people that recover. I just think that in the world today, you don't have to be an alcoholic or a drug addict to be able to take some lessons that we've learned about life. We just drank to them. It doesn't mean that people can't solve their problems from the things that we have to say. But I do know that for 29 years, every day I've been able to dream. And there was no dreaming while I was drinking. No. And the dreams, many, many of those have come true. And many of them I'm working on. Yeah. So what would you leave with someone who is, struggling, thinking, or just got clean? What advice or, steps would you take to tell them, this is my path, this doesn't have to be yours, but this is what I did. What advice would you have to say in working, acting, all of those kinds of things?
Man. Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, and it's something that sounds kind of cliche, but I have to remind myself of this, is keeping things really simple. I can overcomplicate things still. And I think especially once you've been sober for a bit and you've accomplished some things, it's very easy to jump to, wait, I'm on step 1, but I want to be at step 50, right? And so I think for anyone who's new, it's like, keep it simple, do what's right in front of you, just ask for help, and have that faith, just know that every little step is a build. You are building something, and you may not be able to see it yet, and that's okay. More will be revealed. That's what I would say.
Oh my God. Well, thank you. How can our viewers get in contact with you on social media? Maybe to see your show and reach out to you, have the play come to them.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok too. I actually I want to post some clips of the show on TikTok, but and it's just my name, Tara Handron, and I also have a website, tarahandron.com.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm coming to Nebraska, but I will follow you, and I hope that we can get together and maybe have a play on the roof. I would love to see. Yeah, we'll think about it, because
That would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Well, thank you for coming on. Thank you for listening. And thank you for tuning into Inside Style. I am George Worrell, and remember, real style starts with being comfortable in your own skin. We'll see you next time.